The deep relay doesn't get visitors. That's the point. Keth 9 sits 400 meters below the garrison surface platform, carved into bedrock old enough to have forgotten what life felt like, and its entire job is to push signal through the rock without losing coherence. One technician, one posting, one 12-hour rotation, twice a day, with a supply drone dropping ration packs and filter cartridges into the intake shaft. I took the assignment 3 years ago because nobody else wanted it, and because I've always been comfortable in the dark. I mean that plainly. I would run the node for hours without the overheads on. The equipment hum was enough. The bioluminescent trace on the signal boards was enough. I knew the layout by the length of my stride, and after 6 months, I stopped thinking about the dark as a condition. It was just where I worked. The shades found me around month 8. I noticed the nesting material first. Fiber insulation pulled from behind the secondary array rack, twisted into flat coiled pads in the corners of Bay 3. I filed a maintenance note, possible vermin, advise inspection, and then sat on the report for 2 days because the insulation was placed, not dragged. The coils were uniform, low to the ground, and there were 3 of them spread in a pattern that would give any occupant a clear line of sense to the bay door. I pulled up the Kara species file that night. They weren't supposed to come this deep. The adult pack ranged the mid-tier tunnel systems, well documented, well avoided, 6-limbed, armored along the dorsal ridge, bioluminescent amber, channeling through their hide as both communication and threat display. The juveniles, called shades in the field notes, were supposedly kept deeper in den cavities the pack had used since before the installation was built. Keth 9 was built on top of their nursery. Apparently known. Apparently not considered a significant concern, because the adults had never come up through the access shafts and the shades had never left the den level. Until they did. I didn't see them that first night. I turned the lights off the way I always did when I ran the night board, and I sat at the primary array station and listened. After about 40 minutes, I heard something settle its weight on the floor of Bay 3, a slow, careful pressure for points of contact, then 2 more, one by one. Patient, testing each placement. I kept my hands on the board. I kept my breathing even. I didn't turn on a light. That was 18 months ago. I stopped filing maintenance notes. I kept the bay door open, the full 2-meter swing propped with the equipment cart. I didn't leave food. The field notes were clear that provisioning juveniles from outside the pack was inadvisable, and I had no intention of interfering with whatever the adults were doing below. I simply went about my work. I ran the board, logged the signals, ate my ration packs at the primary station, and when I turned the lights off at night, I sat in the dark and breathed slowly and let the node sound like it always sounded. The low cycling hum of the array, the drip of the condensation drain, the occasional knock of the ventilation system settling in the rock. By month 3 of this arrangement, I could hear all 3 of them breathing. I want to be careful about what I claim. I'm not saying they chose me in any deliberate sense. I'm saying the shades are precision instruments for reading a thermal signature and a vibration pattern and a sound profile, and that over 18 months of proximity mine had become familiar to them. They knew the cadence of my boots. They knew the sound of my chair rolling back when I stood. They knew how long my silences ran before I moved again. I was a known quantity in the dark, and in the dark, known quantities are the only safe ones. The sector eclipse hit on a Tuesday. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a compliance order, a rolling power down across every non-essential installation in the sector, while Garrison Command ran an infrastructure audit. Keth 9 was classified non-essential during audit windows. This had not happened before in my 3 years here, and apparently nobody had updated the classification to account for the fact that a live signal relay going dark during a sector audit is not nothing. But compliance had the authority, and at 0340 on that Tuesday, every light, every status panel, every active terminal, and every heating element in Keth 9 shut off at once. I was awake. I was sitting at the primary station running a routine log review, and the room went from dim to absolute in an instant. Not dark the way dim rooms get dark. Dark the way underground rock gets dark when there is genuinely no light source within 400 meters in any direction. I sat still. This is, as it happens, The correct response when you are in a Karath juvenile den in total darkness. Not that I was thinking about it in those terms. I simply sat still because it was what I had always done, and because after 3 years in the deep relay, the dark was not frightening to me. It was just the dark. Bay 3 went quiet for about 30 seconds. Then I heard all three of them stand up. Not flee, not scatter. Stand, 6 limbs finding the floor with the same slow, careful placement I'd heard on that first night. But faster now, coordinated, the 3 patterns overlapping in a way that sounded deliberate. I heard them spread through the main node corridor, one toward the intake shaft, one toward the secondary array room, one to the primary station door, 2 meters ahead of me. The amber lit up. I had never seen them at full bioluminescence. I had seen the glow leaking under the bay door sometimes, a warm amber pulse when something in the deep tunnels disturbed them, but at full display the light was enough to read by. The nearest shade was approximately the size of a large predator hound, armored along the spine in overlapping dorsal plates, the amber running in branching channels through its hide the way lightning branches through a storm. Its head was low and forward, scanning, both primary eyes wide and the secondary sensory pits along its jaw flexing open. It wasn't looking at me. It was looking at the access corridor that led up to the installation throat. It sat down on the threshold of the primary station door and went still. The other 2 held their positions. 3 amber glows in the dark, one at each entrance to the node's inner ring. 18 months of watching me turn off the lights and breathe slowly and keep my hands on the board, and they had apparently decided that the node's inner ring was the perimeter and that I was what the perimeter was for. I found out later that Compliance Officer Dorith Vaz had ordered an extraction team when the power down registered Keth 9 going offline without a scheduled shutdown. 6 officers, full kit, priority extraction. They came down the access shaft at 0412 and got as far as the inner corridor before the nearest shade's bioluminescence stopped them cold. I heard Vaz on the comms 30 seconds later. Level. Professionally neutral. Not quite concealing the fact that he was standing in an underground relay node in total darkness looking at a Koroth juvenile in full display, with the rest of them visible further down the corridor, none of them moving. He said, "Voss, can you walk to the exit?" I said, "I'd rather not disturb them." There was a pause. He said, "They are blocking the exit." I said, "They're sitting on the threshold." That's not the same thing. Another pause. Longer. I heard him say something to his team lead that I wasn't meant to hear, which was a variation of nobody file that there were juveniles in the node structure, and I want to know whose authorization cleared this installation for an unannounced power down. The answer was his own. He had signed a non-essential classification. He had filed the extraction order. He had sent 6 officers into an active Karath juvenile den during a sector-wide blackout without checking current occupancy status, because the occupancy status on record had not been updated since the relay was built. The shades didn't move for 4 hours. When the power came back and they drifted back to Bay 3, one at a time, unhurried, and I heard them settle back into their pads. I filed a comprehensive occupancy report that afternoon. The Garrison Bonding Registry reviewed it and spent 3 days deciding how to classify what I had apparently been doing for the past 18 months. They settled on a designation they coined specifically for Keth 9, noted as a first use. Dark Anchor Standard, defined as a civilian operator whose thermal and behavioral baseline has been incorporated into a Koroth shade cohort's den perimeter calibration through sustained ambient proximity. Dorith Vaz's extraction authorization was reviewed, found to have bypassed current occupancy protocol on 14 non-essential installations during the audit window, and quietly retired from the active record. He requested reassignment to a surface posting. Granted, I kept my assignment. The relay came back up to full signal within the hour after power was restored. Bay 3 has 4 pads now. I don't know when they added the 4th. I just noticed it one morning pulling a filter from the secondary rack. Same coiled construction, same careful placement, but sized differently. Smaller. About right for a person sitting on the floor with their back against the rack housing, which is where I sit sometimes when I'm running overnight diagnostics. I filed an updated occupancy report. I noted the addition. I haven't tried the pad yet, but I've thought about it.